Alright, it's working? Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to reading the Sealed Nectar. I'm surviving the apocalypse. Hope you are too. We're on page 33 of the Sealed Nectar, and we're on number 2. The purely Medanese polytheists constituted the second sector with whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, had to deal. Those people had no control at all over the Muslims. Some of them had no ill will against the Muslims, but were rather doubtful of their ancestors' religious practices, and developed some inclination towards Islam, and before long they embraced the new faith and were truly devoted to Allah. However, some others developed evil intentions against the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his followers, but were too cowardly to resist them publicly. They were rather, under those Islamically favorable conditions, obliged to falsely show sociability and friendliness. Abdullah bin Ubay, who had almost been given kinship over al-Khazraj and al-Aus tribes in the wake of Buwaith war between the two tribes. These two tribes became the head of that group of hypocrites. The Prophet's arrival and the vigorous rise of the new spirit of Islam negated that program, and the idea was dropped. Abdullah, seeing another one, Muhammad, peace be upon him, coming to deprive him and his agents of the proposed superior position, could not be pleased, and for obvious reasons he showed desire for Islam, but with horrible disbelief deeply rooted in his heart. He also used to exploit some events in weak-hearted new converts, to use them in his nasty schemes against the true believers. Number 3. The Jews who had migrated to Al-Hijaz from Syria following the Byzantine and Assyrian persecution campaigns. The Assyrians were one of my favorite empires. I love their hieroglyphic type of carvings where their leaders, like Ashurbanipal, is stabbing the lion. I have that tattoo. Were the third category existing on the demographic scene in Medina. In their new residing place, they assumed the Arabian stamp in dress, language, and manner of life, and there were also instances of intermarriage with the local Arabs. However, they retained their ethnic particularism and remained separated from mixing with the immediate environment. They even used to pride in their Jewish-Israeli origin and looked down upon the Arabs around, mentioning them as illiterate, meaning brutal, naive, and backward. They desired the wealth of their neighbors to be made lawful to them so that they could consume it in the way they liked. And there's a quote here, family. Because they say there is no blame on us to betray and take the properties of the illiterate Arabs. Wow. Religiously, they showed no zeal. Their most obvious religious commodity was fortune-telling, witchcraft, and the secret arts blowing on knots, for which they used to attach to themselves advantages of science and spiritual superiority. They excelled at the arts of earning money and trading. They, in fact, monopolized trading in cereals, dates, wines, clothes, export, and import, for the services they offered to the Arabs. The latter paid heavily. Usury was common practice amongst them, lending to the Arab notables great sums to be wasted on poets who used to write poems in their honor, and in prideful occasions, and in turn seizing their fertile land given as surety. Oh, so the poets had to be enlisted even in Arabia to flatter those who they were hired by, the noble class. It's kind of like the bards of Europe, right? They were very good at corrupting and scheming. They used to sow seeds of enmity between neighboring tribes and persuade each one to devise plots against the other, with the natural outcome of continual, exhaustive, bloody fighting. Another example today, but less so, more in the 90s and 80s, the cartels of Mexico hire the corridos players to play music for them and talk about how good their cartel is. And they fund those certain, corrido guitar playing banda groups. Valentin Elizalde, he made a song called A Mis Enemigos, and it was talking about some ladies and how he gets all the ladies, and he was a very famous musician. He pissed off a cartel and they killed him. They literally pulled up, filled the entire SUV filled with bullets, and that's how Valentin Elizalde died. So in Mexico, the cartels do hire certain artists to sing songs about them in a positive way, and if you don't, they're going to kill you. It's lessening now because AMLO of Mexico is doing a fantastic job. Yeah, that's interesting. So the poets, even for Arabs, were like bribed and pressured into like sing me songs of praises. That's a very interesting thing. Whenever they felt the fire of hatred was about to subside, they would increase it by adopting new means so that they could always have the upper hand, and at the same time gain heavy interest rates on loans spent on intertribal warfare. Whew. 3 famous tribes of Jews constituted the demographic presence in Yathrib, now Medina: Banu Kanuka, allies of Al-Khazraj tribe; Banu an-Nadir and Banu Qurayza, who allied Al-Aus and inhabited the suburbs of Medina. Naturally, they held the news changes with disgust and were terribly hateful to them, simply because Allah's messenger was on a different race, and this point was in itself too repulsive for them to reconcile with. Second, Islam came to bring about a spirit of good relation, to terminate the state of enmity and hatred, and to establish a social regime based on condemnation of the prohibited and promotion of the allowed. Adherence to these principles of life implied paving the way for an Arab unity that could work to the disadvantage of the Jews and their interests at both the social and economic levels. The Arab tribes would then try to restore their wealth and land misappropriated by the Jews through usurious practices. Interesting. So, usurious practices, they get the land. That's kind of like if you default on your house payment, the bank repossesses it, right? There's a lot of the similarities where like you lend money, you can't pay, the interest gets too high, you need me to give me something collateral, right? Leverage your car and your house, and it's a lot of trickery in finance. They tell you not to go into debt, yet at every single corner they make you think you have to go in debt. A lot of media outlets and, our general culture. And even back then, in the Sealed Nectar, that time period, it still was like that. It's almost like humans love doing that to each other. Interesting. What do you think, family? Let me know. Indeed, they tell you don't take out the loans, but sometimes you have no choice. And then the creditor becomes your boss in a hard way, because now you're a debitor. Very dark.